Hey everybody, I am here with David and Peter from the Shiro crew to talk about a bunch of stuff, but also especially the magazine. How you guys doing?
Uh, Doing good. How are you doing?
Doing really good,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this one is unexpectedly sponsored by by New England Brewing Company.
Oh.
So yeah, it's been an interesting couple days. Like last night, my friend John's band Scavengers played 20 minutes up the street from me. So I went to see that, and I may have allegedly had a few beers. So I woke
Hmm.
up this morning feeling like, okay, well, I got this thing to do, but whatever, it's not a big deal. I didn't realize what it was, but this company, beer company, New England Brewing Company, when they sell their six packs, they have the plastic covers over
Hmm.
all of them, so you can't see the top. And just like the Willy Wonka thing, they had a couple of golden lids. And if you were the
Oh, cool.
golden lid winner, you got to
Hmm.
go on October 1st and do a bunch of stuff. And my friend and I got it, but I glanced at their website and I was like, all right, so we get like a free six pack or something, whatever. I'll go. I like the beer. I was wrong. There is a huge Oktoberfest party today, and they treated the winners
Oh
like
my
Willy
god.
Wonka. They were amazing. So we got a free hoodie. We got all you could drink, which I didn't. I only had three. I didn't go crazy, but all you could drink in the free beer mug, free food. They sent us away
Nice.
with a case of beer, a tour of the whole thing. Like it was, they treated us so amazing. So while
Prost.
while this isn't sponsored by New England Brewing Company, this absolutely 100% is. Oh, I don't want to spill like my cord here. This 100% is sponsored by New England Brewing Company. So
That's so
yeah,
funny because I was thinking to myself, is Bob going to be drinking? Should I bring something? And I was like, because the last one that we did, I think you were on water at that point. But
yeah, because
anyway,
we did it earlier or
yeah,
something, I
yeah,
think.
yeah. There's actually a
Yeah,
brewing company here in San Diego called New English Brewing, and that guy
that's funny.
Simon, he's from Britain, and he does like a bunch of like Burton on Trent style ales and stuff. But so this place is called New England, right? As in New
Yes,
England. Okay,
New
cool.
England Brewing Company, and what I'm drinking
Interesting.
now is Wonktoberfest beer, like Willy Wonka,
Oh, that's
um,
awesome.
and it's a German style dark lager, and it's good. It's very good. Yeah, we had a
Dark
bunch of
lager.
different ones today. They had Imperial Stormtrooper Ale that was like 12%. Like there's a bunch of cool stuff out here. So
Nice.
I always
Cool.
I enjoy very much just having a beer in these chats because I really
Yeah.
want these to feel like people are sliding over a chair and hanging out with us at a bar, coffee shop, whatever. And then once I found out a bunch of people were really annoyed by the fact that I crack a beer and drink it during these, now I kind of have to because
Oh,
just
I love it. Yeah, yeah. No, I think
Tasty.
it's so funny that that ticks people off. It's funny. I was just
yeah,
like, come on, it's just a beer. Big deal.
yeah. I'm not trying to say it's making me cool. I'm the least cool person I know. I like it, so everybody else can enjoy whatever the hell they want. But I want
There
to
you
have my
go.
beer, and the darker the better for me. Man,
Cheers.
what a terrible pour, by the way. Did you see
Yeah, I
that?
know
Look at
that
the
you got
head
a
on
lot of
this
head
one.
on there. Is that a dunkel you said, or like just
Yeah,
a?
it's a dark German pilsner, so it's
Oh,
kind of like
okay.
lower alcohol content, but
Really
dark
malty,
without
really
being a stout.
biscuity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I got my earbuds on so I could hear myself, and I caught my hand in it during the pour. So yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's gonna take a moment to settle. So yeah, if I'm not so sharp today, blame today's sponsor, New England Brewing Company, and
That's
yeah,
great.
they even got I got a token for a free growler for the next time I go and stuff like that. They were
Oh
so
man,
nice
I'm
to us.
jealous.
So
That sounds so
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats.
and one of the people there looked like a spitting image of Martha Plimpton. So it was so funny because I just like she's got to know, right? She's got
Yeah.
to know she looks like a super famous actress. There's no way
Yeah.
no one told her that before, but I don't want to be that guy, and I don't want her to be offended. What if she's like, I hate the Goonies? Like, yeah, I mean, who hates the Goonies? But still.
I don't know.
All right, well. So the reason specifically I wanted to talk to you two, not just because I like you and not just because I wanted to have a beer with friends, but I've got this magazine from you guys, and I was so impressed. And the first thing I noticed, as dumb as this might sound, but the very first thing that I noticed was the barcode up here almost
Yeah.
looks 3D. It looks like I
Does
had
it
to
really?
touch it a couple times to be like, is this a cutout? So like I open page one and the barcode's going to be inside, like
Huh.
in while that fun little optical illusion's neat, it gives the sense of the quality that went into that because there's
Did you
no way
scan
you
it?
could have. No, I haven't yet. Should I?
It'll take you to our website. All the
Oh, that's
there
what I
are
figured.
we use barcodes and QR codes in there as a kind of a way to keep it current, so that for certain citations and stuff like that, where we're not able to like fit all that information, people can just scan it with their phone and it'll take them to either a clipping or a YouTube video or to our website, what have you. And that way, the magazine kind of is evergreen in that way, even
I
though
love it.
it's gonna get old, on the shelf, but it'll certain information can be updated.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
No, I mean the content coming from your whole crew. I knew this magazine wasn't going to suck. I knew it, but
I'm
I've
glad that
also
was a
seen.
foregone conclusion because I didn't know it wasn't going to suck.
Well, I have and I don't mean to be negative. I mean this mostly in a positive way. But there is a bunch of very cool retro themed magazines out there. But there's a bunch that are not very cool. The last one that I saw was so bad that it turned me off from doing any kind of magazine. Like somebody had talked about, maybe you want to do something like, just a fun yearly retro RGB one. I was like, oh, it's a good idea. And then I saw that and I'm like, is this what people expect magazines to be like? No.
So when I asked you like a year ago or 2 years ago to do like a write up, you're like thinking like, oh God.
No, this was more recent. Probably if you
More
asked me
recent.
a year ago, I would have been excited about it. But
Yeah.
if you asked me, like 3-6 months ago, I'd have been like, I don't know. Let me see your
Yeah.
magazine first.
Let's see it first. Okay. That's fair.
Holy crap! Yeah. So first and foremost, how did you get? And I'm going to ask random questions. I'm going to bounce around because that's how my silly brain works. But how did you get the quality this high? Is this something? Is this? And please excuse my ignorance. I've never done anything like this. But is this as simple as like in checkout, you click the high quality option and it shows up this way, or did you have to specify the thickness of the cover, the thickness of the
You have to
pages?
specify everything. Actually,
Okay.
ignorance is allowed because back in, I want to say 2018, when Peter and I had this idea, we were both completely ignorant. Peter knew how to write, and boy, is he a damn good writer. And I knew how to do art, right? Mostly digital art. And that was about the extent of it. The rest was a learning process, honestly. And publishing is a beast of a thing like that I've had to learn as I go. So, if anything I can say about this magazine is that I've been teasing it a lot over the years, like in private chats and like kind of showing people, hey, look what we're doing, and everybody's like, oh, cool. Yeah. We'll see when that happens, like whenever that actually comes to, ends up being more than vapor, or just an image that I'm sharing in a private chat or something. And so, yeah, it's been a long time. I think I kind of bit off more than I could chew, Peter and I, but like it's been a long time. But we said, darn it, we're going to make this happen. We're going to do it like by hook or by crook. We're going to make this come out, so that we have something to be proud of that we can look back on and say, we made that and it's cool. People like it. I want to bring smiles to people's faces and help them kind of relive that nostalgia because game magazines are so important to Peter and I. Like, right, Peter? You want to speak on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in that era, that was sort of not quite pre-internet, but not too many people had internet. So magazines were really the way to, absorb and consume information and find out what was coming down and read reviews and all that kind of stuff. And even back then, amongst the professional magazines, there were some that were written really well and you looked forward to them. And, you almost felt like the writers were almost like personal friends because they just did such a good job with their magazines. And then there were also magazines that, the quality just wasn't there, whether it was the writing itself or the layouts or the graphics that were used or even the pages, they were flimsy and they were just crap quality. So, even back in the day when all that stuff was out there, you had all kinds of varying degrees of quality. So when you and I were thinking of doing this magazine, Dave, I remembered things we weren't sure about is how often could we put them out? How many pages would there be, et cetera, et cetera. None of that was set in stone. But if there's one thing that I know neither of us would be willing to compromise on, it was quality. We wanted to make sure that we put out a really solid, good quality magazine, that when folks held it in their hands and flipped through it and read through it and everything like that, it would feel like a really good 90s style magazine. And I hope that we have succeeded with this, you know?
Yeah, you did. And the other thing I got to say too, and I obviously mean this with love, but some of the written stuff, right? You get halfway through reading and you forget that you're reading a magazine because it's just now you're just sucked into an article. So
Mm-hmm.
that is always the sign of a good content, any good content, because if you're, well, of course the nostalgia part's fun, the quality of the pages is fun, but as you're really getting into it, the subject that you talk about, some of the stuff, it's like you're just engrossed in the content. And
Yeah.
that, I mean, that's a win. Like if the magazine is printed so badly that you're squinting to read whatever is on there, it's like you don't get that opportunity to just enjoy the content. You're like, what the hell did I pay for here? So
yeah, growing up, so Peter and I were both big gamers. We loved to game growing up and play games. And it's like now we're like grown up gamers, we're adult gamers. And I think that we kind of interact with the media a little bit differently. We're both nerds. We love hardware. Absolutely love hardware. We love pushing it in every way, exploring every port that the Saturn has to exploit, every little peripheral. We love game history preservation. We love all the ephemera that comes with gaming magazines and standees and booth, little placards and stuff like that, and silver, commercially pressed silver discs and stuff like that. So we really love everything that kind of is in the periphery or surrounding video games, and I think that as adults, that's kind of how we nerd out these days, much less so with just playing. I mean, we still play the games, of course, but I think we spend more time on video signals and on, all this stuff, kind of like, that's what we have in common with you too, is just getting the most out of these consoles and just kind of enjoying them in new ways. And so that's one of those things when it comes to like the magazines, the interviews with like David Warhol, talking about the making of Bug. Here's a game that is kind of divisive. Some people are like, Bug, that's I'm like, but you know what? There's a story behind that. That's the Sega away team. They were called the Tiger team or the away team, and they were brought in as a small example of second party. So they weren't first party, they weren't third party, they were second party developers that were kind of brought into the fold. And they were like, okay, you guys are going to be our Sega away team, and you're going to be able to develop this game. And telling that story and getting that out there, I think, is so important. And it gives people a new appreciation for some of these underappreciated games. I think the stuff that Panda does too, Pandemonium, he'll take a game like Virtual Racing, which is not even a port, it's like a remake, or he'll take something like, what have you? What was the most recent one?
You mean Time Warner's Virtual Racing, Racing?
Time Warner's Virtual, exactly. And he'll get people playing these games again and being like, well, you know what? Actually, now like viewed in this new light, viewed, with all of that in mind, the people that actually made it and all of the challenges and hoops they had to jump through, obstacles they had to face. It really gives you a new kind of appreciation for the game. And even if it's not the best game ever, you just appreciate that history, where it sits in the history of the console and its games, So I think that's kind of what we wanted to do with this magazine, is kind of bring some of that information to light and help people find new appreciation.
All right, so why don't we start just at the beginning? Because I'm kind of fascinated about how you got from your idea in 2018 to here. So can you both just like rewind? It's 2018. You come up with the idea to do a magazine. What's the next step?
You'd have to go back before 2018, actually.
Okay.
It goes back to early days of Shiro. So it goes back to 2017 when Shiro was a podcast. And there was and we were just three guys. You were Pat, Dave, and Kay at the time, Murder of Crows. And we were doing the podcast, but there was this guy on the Facebook groups named Peter, and he would write these really elaborate posts. And I'm not talking about like the boring TLDR kind of posts that you kind of get upset at because they're
find on Facebook.
No, instead there were like, paragraphs or a couple of paragraphs that would just suck you in, and I'd be like, this guy can write, he's not just like a good writer, he's a great writer. And I'm thinking like, it kind of reminds me of like Richard Ledbetter, or Sam Hickman or Lee Nutter, some of those guys from the original OSSM crew, like, wouldn't it be great if we could pull him in as a Shiro? So, we all agreed, he was like, oh yeah, he conducts himself well in public. He seems like a nice guy. Let's extend extend an invitation. And so, yeah, Peter was one of the earliest to join the podcast, and then started writing exclusively for our website. And he was the only one doing it at that time, writing feature length articles. Peter, do you want to talk a little bit about how much time you poured into those articles?
Yeah, it's, I'm sure as any content creator could attest, there's just so many hours that go into whatever the end product is, and when it's a written article, I mean, you start to write the article, you kind of structure it, you break it down into sections, and then you realize you really need to do some extra research, and you start digging, and you come across archival material, whether it's early designs or drafts or whatever. Potentially sometimes you can reach out to some of the folks that were involved in building a game or whatever. And it just evolves, it grows and grows and grows. And what you're left with ultimately, at least, the articles that I've been writing for Shiro, is, you're left with something that's super hefty and meaty. And, there's a lot to it. So this isn't something you're going to read in 5 minutes, in between, tasks or whatever. So it takes a lot to put a solid article out there. And, when we were thinking of magazine, one thing I thought of is we're no longer under any kind of time crunch like the folks back in the day were. We're not trying to meet any specific deadlines. It's not like if we don't report on something immediately, it's going to be stale in 2 weeks or whatever, like the folks back then were. So I figured, okay, well, we can take our time with this. And so, of course, my articles got really long, and I'm not talking long for the sake of being long, but there's just a lot of different angles that I would always cover, and ways of looking at things that I would sort of make sure that everything had its own section. But when it came time to put them into the magazine, they were almost too long, weren't they? And that's something that you kind of had to.
You had to cut it down, because I was
Yes.
like, that's a big discipline in art and in any kind of content creation, is crystallizing what you want to say into the most focused form of itself, right? And but the thing is, though, Peter's articles weren't really getting out there, was the biggest issue. Like that I think was the impetus for the magazine, was that I was frustrated because here was this great writer pouring in countless hours, and he wouldn't half-ass it just because it was for a blog or whatever. Like, he was writing these magazine quality articles, and like maybe 100 people, if that, would be reading them, and I was like, we got to find a way to get this in front of more people, because we're doing videos and we're doing the podcast, but like all this effort and all this talent is going to waste, I feel, because not enough people are reading it and enjoying these articles. So I was like, what do you think about making this a magazine? And then it's like, we could really get this thing in front of more eyes, Right, Peter?
Yeah. And you know what? Like, I mean, obviously the idea was super exciting. And immediately, like, the first thought was, okay, it has to be all about quality. That's got to be the foundation. No matter how long it takes us to put a product out, whether we have to really take our time with it. None of that mattered, so long as the end result was quality. And I think, from there on, we sort of went through a process of figuring out, okay, well, what would we want to focus on in that first issue? What articles do we want to pull in there? How much of it has to be cleaned up, trimmed down, with the writing that we were going to include. And then how do we make it look just like a magazine from the 90s, including things like, ads and, all kinds of sort of sections of a magazine that you would expect to see back then. So I think it was, it was interesting because it was our first issue. So now you could say that we've almost got a template that we can work off of. We've got some direction, but this was, there's no, there's nothing out there that will, you allow you to cut and paste and just slam a magazine together. Nothing of any quality anyways. So, a lot of that had to do, with looking at, okay, what is it that we want to include? How do we want to make it look? And how do we ensure that it, stays top quality? And a lot of that was your design choices, Dave. And, even things like font size and font color, and making sure that it would stand out and you wouldn't have to be squinting and everything. So I know it was a lot of work to get it to that state. So it's definitely something I'm very proud of, for sure.
So what was step one? I guess step two. Step one's deciding you're going to do it. So what's step to then? Like, what was? I guess it would be collecting some written works, but like when it comes to actually magazine creation, it's not so
Well,
much the content because obviously
sure.
we know where you're getting the content from. You're making it, but
Hmm.
like, what was that next step?
Yeah. Um, so at the time, I was already doing, like long box, US hypothetical long box repros and stuff like that. I was doing like Saturn games, and I was doing like complete manuals. So I was like getting my feet wet with like publishing, doing like saddle stitch publishing, and which is not what this is. This is perfect bound publishing, but still it's a form of publishing. And so I was kind of getting used to that and different print qualities and papers and stocks and stuff like that. But the real thing was when Peter and I sat down and we were like, what do we really want this to be? Like what do we want this to be at the end of the day? And we decided there were a few things. There were a few like important things to us. It needed to be free for the community. The PDF, the digital version, this is for the community. This is done by fans for fans. This is not a profitable venture for us. This is something we can show our kids, and be proud of. But like, honestly, we're not trying to get rich. We're definitely not going to get rich. If anything, we might lose money. But the point is, we wanted it to be free for the community. And then if we did do a limited print version, we wanted it to basically be cost, for the community. I want people to get this in their hands for an affordable price, and I want to be able to do more like that. We decided that we wanted it to, we don't have any solicited ads in there. We don't have any like paid ads. The items that are in this magazine that we put mock ads for, like the RetroBit controllers or the Satiator or the Fenrir, these are products that we have tried, we have vetted ourselves, and we feel that these things provide value to the Saturn gaming community, that they provide solid collateral. The projects that people have worked on, like the bulk / English translation and dub, it's an excellent game to begin with, but it's an excellent project. They did an amazing job, and we feel like folks owe it to themselves to go play this and experience this. So anything that we advertised is stuff that we feel benefits the community, and they can trust those ads, like saying, okay, these guys aren't being paid to say this. We might even put a RetroRGB ad in there, because honestly, like the amount of value that you bring to the community with your in-depth analysis and all the value and wealth of information that you have as a one-stop shop for like quick reference is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. We didn't have it 5 years ago, or we certainly didn't have it a decade ago when I was trying to figure out all this stuff, like we discussed before. So those are the kind of things that we're passionate about telling the community about and advertising in this magazine. And then what
I love
else?
that. I thought that was so cool, and thank you for the compliment.
Yeah.
I loved all of that except RetroBit. They're a big company. You should send them an invoice for this shit.
Yeah,
Ron Bang, what the fuck, dude? You should pay them for this.
Who knows? Maybe we will, but again, like and there was one ad that I put in there, one quote unquote ad that I put in there, and I'm not gonna throw anybody directly under the bus or anything like that, but there was an ad that I kind of pulled because of some of the conduct that said company has had in the community, and I felt like, okay, like there are enough folks that are upset about this company and how they conduct themselves that I just don't feel like, even though this is a great product, I don't really feel like it's something that I want to blast out there. Oh yeah, we totally endorse and support this company, because
it makes complete sense.
Exactly. But yeah, RetroBit, we know Richard. We really nice guy. It's a great product. It's not perfect, but they did actually try to go back and revise it. They did try to listen to fan feedback. They made a really solid wireless control pad that you can use for 99% of the games on a Saturn with success, and it means you don't have to buy one of those funky IR controllers that are like a couple $100
I
bucks.
actually like the wired controllers.
You like the wired
Saturn
ones?
and Genesis.
Yeah.
The USB and the original.
Sure.
I think they're really, really close to the original, and I haven't had.
They are.
I haven't heard too many people complain. The Saturn wireless one I had was pretty darn laggy, but I think that's with an older firmware.
Was that a Bluetooth or was that the RF?
It was the one that came. I think it was this exact one that came with the
2.4
little
gigahertz.
box that have both the both receivers in it.
Oh, and it was really laggy.
Really
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. Okay, well, they did.
But
They
it was the
did.
first edition, and they did have a couple of firmware updates. But I
They
kind of,
did.
yeah. I mean, I bought it because that was my main go-to testing controller
Yeah,
because it
Mhm.
was great to be wireless. I could use it with
yeah.
everything. But once I
Mhm,
started actually playing, and so I was like, oh, why?
mhm,
You know, when the Mr. Add-ons latency sheet came out, and I saw how low latency their wired ones were, I was like, well,
mhm.
why would I ever even question it? Let me just get the USB one and use that with Mister.
True. And I have to say, if you are doing video analysis, for like lag test analysis, or you happen to be playing like really twitchy shmups, I don't recommend that anybody plays wireless. Honestly, I certainly don't myself. Like whenever I'm playing any kind of bullet hell shmup or something, it's got to be wired. Like I don't kid
Yeah.
myself. There's always going to be latency with a wired connection, no matter what, unless we skip
But
forward
you're
100
playing a
years.
turn-by-turn RPG or something. It's like there's
Yeah.
zero difference.
Yeah, yeah,
You'll
yeah.
never notice that.
Exactly. And so for that, it's great. I use it with my kids, so they don't like go tripping over the cables and pull the system out, which happened the other day with my Neo Geo CDZ. Like they're playing the Wii, and they're like doing the whipping the controller. I think it's okay, but I mean, I like kind of freaked out a little bit because I was like, it was pushed back into the like console, and I was just like, this console, I cannot like buy a new one of these now without going deep in my pockets, But yeah,
Yeah.
so
So,
anyway.
what software does one use to design the layout of a magazine? I know nothing about any of this stuff.
Okay, so sorry. So yeah, I think the correct answer is going to be something like InDesign, Adobe InDesign. I used Photoshop quite a lot because I am really heavy on graphics, and I like to design it so that the text and the graphics are like kind of like intertwined, on a lot of that
Mhm.
stuff. Now I know that you can still do that kind of stuff with InDesign, and so you're technically supposed to use Adobe Photoshop and then bridge over to InDesign, and it's like you're working on graphics in Photoshop and then you're bridging over to InDesign and it's porting everything in and you're doing all your text layout in InDesign. So I think that that's like the correct answer, but that's not how I did it. I pretty much did this whole thing in Photoshop, which like a lot of magazine people are probably going to laugh when they hear that. But you know what? I'm not a magazine guy. Like I'm a Photoshop guy and an Illustrator guy. Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop are like my bread and butter. And so that's just kind of like how I came at it, and I've
I
talked
mean,
to,
if it comes
yeah,
out good, then everybody else
right.
could eat it.
Right,
Like,
exactly. So like guys like I don't know, Jeremy Parrish or whatever, or the dudes who are doing the books and stuff like that on, or I don't know, newsletters and stuff like that. They're probably using InDesign, and I might move over at some point. But it's like at this point, I have a workflow that I'm good at with Photoshop, and I'm just like, I don't know. Yeah, it
Hey, if
works.
it works, you should use it. I mean, most of the
Yeah.
screenshots that I captured that ended up being used in the magazine were using SSF, you know, a super old emulator, but it's stable. It works. I can use it quickly. It doesn't demand too much resources. So, we use it. So,
Hmm.
don't knock it. I mean, the results are obviously superb. So,
Yeah.
mhm. I mean, that's always a constant battle for any content creator, and you never really know until it's too late, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I can't tell you how many times people have said like, you have to switch to this program, and I'm like, And sometimes I spend like 3 or 4 hours learning it, and
Hmm.
it's not at all something that would help, and I just wasted half a day. And
Yeah.
other times I finally get around to it, and I spend 3 or 4 hours learning it, and then all of a sudden I realize I've saved myself 5 minutes a day every time I do this, which
Hmm.
immediately adds up to holy crap, this was so much better of a workflow. So it's a roll of the dice. You're damned if you do,
Yeah.
you're damned if you don't.
Yeah. I
for
I I
sure.
believe I'm in the camp of I believe that I would save time ultimately, but I would have to invest a lot of time upfront to learn InDesign like in and out the way that I know Photoshop in and out. You know what I'm saying? So there are a lot of
Yeah.
things that I can do very quickly in Photoshop. I could probably do the whole thing quicker in InDesign if I already like took a class or something, like knew it. And so yeah, like for now I'm pretty much like Illustrator and Photoshop.
Yeah. So, how did you choose the layout of stuff? Because of course, there's been many really nice magazines since the 80s and
Yeah.
90s that talk about video games. So you had a basic template to go through, but
Well,
just,
yeah. I've had
like,
people tell me, "Oh, go ahead. Go ahead."
no, it's just like the flow of it, right? Like
Right.
it feels legit. It feels like, not, I don't mean the quality, which is obviously good, but like,
Right.
it's got a really nice cover that absolutely catches your eye. The giant bug eyes, you know
Mhm.
exactly what you're looking at as soon as you do it, but you open it up and it feels like a 90s Sega ad is in here. And
Mhm.
then, and then you have the very, I mean this with love, but you have a very typical 90s style game magazine. So you have, the staff, the support, cover story, like, table of contents. But like, how do you, other than that, other than the very root of it, how would you decide what comes after that? Like, because that's one of those things where you have infinite amount of choices.
I think it's
So
just a
starting us
lot of
out, you get the sense of familiarity, but then where do you go from there?
yeah. Well, I mean, part of it is doing a layout, right, Peter? Like we have
Mhm.
to kind of like do an outline. Let's say like a spreadsheet outline, of like, okay, this is how many pages we're shooting for, and we've got to kind of lay out content like this, right? To kind of portion it out and make sure that it's even with the amount of ads and little blurbs and feature. You got your cover story, you got your feature stories, you've got your developer interviews, you got your like one page write up kind of things. We're in this next issue, we're going to have like game reviews. Pandemonium is going to do some game reviews for us. We're going to have an arcade corner. So we're definitely looking to do more with the next issue. But I think it starts there, and then it's just we're super inspired. Like, I don't want to do all the talking here. I want Peter to be able to talk more. But like, I would say that we're just super inspired by, like John Linneman's boss, Richard Ledbetter, and that magazine was just killer. Like, official Sega Saturn magazine. If you look at that and you look at this, you will see that we were incredibly inspired by much of what they did, and that was kind of like a foundation that we worked around. That and Next Generation.
Yeah.
What would you think,
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, those two are definitely the two big influences. Like when I was thinking of this earlier, when we were getting it all together, I thought, okay, well, what were some design ideas that absolutely worked? What were some things that I really, really enjoyed myself as a magazine reader back in the day? Because, just like you said, this is a magazine by fans for the fans. And so we want to take the best of what we saw back in the day and sort of distill it and be able to sort of, put it in a nice package. And so, yes, the official Sega Saturn magazine, the inspiration for me out of that was just the quality of writing. Like, I mean, it was heads and tails better than, a lot of the other content that you can get at the time. You could tell that it was written by pros. It was written by people who weren't taking you for fools. Yes, especially towards the end of that magazine's run, they got a little bit excited because it was a losing battle. And so they tried to sort of marshal a lot more excitement than maybe there was a right to have at that time as a Saturn fan. But there was never any there was never any crap that you had to wade through when you were looking at those magazines. And then Next Generation, which you also called out, it almost read like more of an industry magazine as opposed to necessarily a consumer magazine, even though that's ultimately what it was. But it was just written in a very mature manner, and the layout was mature, and it was logical, and it flowed. And so those were some of the cues that I wanted to take, out of the sort of glorious magazines of the past, and make sure that we can sort of have the spirit of that represented in our work. So yeah, that's that played a big sort of role in it. And there were definitely other mags that we definitely wanted to make sure we didn't emulate, because they didn't, sort of reflect the qualities that we wanted to reflect. So, and we're not going to name them. They all, they all had their purpose. They all had their niche that they served. But yeah, it was definitely looking at, what was done before us, what was done that we want to emulate, that was really sort of best in class, and how do we take that and squish it into a magazine of our own.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And personally, I'm glad that people out there who are, average Joes, and they have other areas of expertise, but they look at this and they're very happy with it. I'm glad for that. At the same time, I look at it and I already see it for all of its flaws and everything and I know for a fact that the dudes over at like Sega Powered, who also put out a really nice polished mag, I know that they know what to look for. They know the things that are kind of amateurish, and then they know the things that are, oh well, this is good. This is quite good for for what they're working, their resources and their and so I know the areas where we already need to improve. But yeah, I'm just glad that regular people don't know that stuff, and that they can get it in hand and be like, "Hey, this reminds me of Game Fan." We've been compared a lot to Game Fan, which is funny because I've read a bit of Game Fan, but it wasn't the one that that I really read a lot of back in the day. But a lot of people been comparing it to Game Fan. Funny enough, yeah.
It is always funny to see different creators and how they have their own critical eye on their work and how it applies to different things, and it's just always something that I kind of laugh at because, like,
right,
with a lot of the videos that I put out, like, there's got to be a cutout or a cutoff, right? Like, I would still be working on my second video if I didn't just say I got to move on. So when I see those, it's like a lot of times all I see is the mistakes or what's changed since the video is out, and it kind of bugs me. But on the other side, like, I listen to some of the albums I've recorded over the years or songs or whatever, and I'm just
right.
I'm sure if I went looking for it, I could find a million mistakes, but that's not what I hear. I'm just like,
right.
Cool, I did that. That's neat.
Cool.
Like,
Yeah,
so.
I recorded this. I did that. Yeah, I know that feeling. It's great. And I do think that that's the takeaway. At the end of the day, like, all things considered, I look at this mag and I just say, this is something I did with my Shiro bros. Pat's got an article in there. Nick's got one in there. Peter has several articles. I've got a few that are, kind of shallower articles, but they're cool. And then the design stuff. And this is something we made together, and I'm just so proud of it. And honestly, we all have day jobs. We have pretty good jobs. We're pretty comfortable so that we could do this thing that was completely a hobby. It was just a hobby. It was a labor of love. We didn't feel any kind of pressure like we had to get it out the door, like Peter said, because we're expecting to make money on it or anything like that. It was really something we were able to take time with. And I've heard people say before, like, oh, if you value your own work, you should charge for it, And I get that. But again, like, I work a good job and I get paid well for it. So it's like, when it comes to something like this, that's a complete hobby, I'm just happy we were able to make something for the community, as maybe trite or cliche as that sounds. And I'm just happy that we were able to make something for the community that people can enjoy. And I really do hope that it brings some enjoyment to people, I hope they read it. I hope they don't just put it on their shelves, and
then I think that whole comment about if you value your work, you charge for it. I think that is incredibly situational. And I think if you have something like this, like if you wanted to make the Shiro website podcast videos your day job, hypothetically speaking, that. Yes, you should try to get some sort of pay model in, but the magazine, right, with all love and respect, like, you're never going to be able to shut down the rest of what you do and only do the magazine. That's just not sustainable. So why would you think about it as, let's see how I could make money from this, when you could say, hey, this is a fun hobby. Let's not have to worry about any kind of influence. And let's not say, hey, let's replace the cover instead of Bug, which has the really awesome interview that talks about the dev kits and being in, the second party team. Oh, let's remove that because I don't know, Daytona USA is going to get more purchases from it, which I love Daytona, but this was a really cool story. So the fact that you didn't have to say, well, what's going to make all the money from this? You just said, what's going to be the best for this project.
Right.
I think that is such a huge advantage in stuff like this.
Yeah.
That's why I'm a failed YouTuber, because I always put what's best for the people who are watching over what's best for the algorithm. So it's kind of like the same thing, It's it definitely came through. Like, you didn't hide the fact that it is for fans by fans. You put it right on the front page in a beautiful glossy logo. So it's I love that. I think that's really cool.
And it's also a little tongue in cheek. Like, at the top, we say #1 fanzine, because like at the end of the day, it is a fanzine. But I think Peter and I, there's this concept in Japanese manga and anime of the fool. The fool is like, he succeeds and does amazing things and blows everybody away, even though you completely underestimate him, and he's basically like a fool, or like a drunken master or something like that, right? And in my mind, I was like, we'll always call this like a fanzine, but it'll be like the freaking like best fanzine there's ever been, right? Like we'll kind of keep people's expectations really low so that we can always blow them away, instead of just instead of acting, trying to act like we're a professional magazine or anything like that. Like, it is what it is.
No acting anymore. There's zero acting here. This is as pro as it gets. So
yeah,
it's but I did love that. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
So you set all of this up in Photoshop mostly,
mm-hmm.
and some of it's kind of obvious because you would probably have to do this as one piece, right? The front, back, and middle.
But you don't have to design it that way. Luckily enough, you don't have to design it that way. There are print companies that do that for you. They take all of the page designs that you've done. I mean, and I design in spreads. In Photoshop, I actually do design in a spread. If I'm going to be going from one side of the page to the other with a big, huge title or something like that, I'll design it that way. But then I have to cut it up I have to essentially cut it in pieces and feed it to. So we used a print service that's actually based in the UK, but they have a warehouse in Illinois. So they have a fulfillment warehouse in the US as well. So their customer service is in the UK, and they have factories in the UK, but they also have fulfillment in the US. And we were able to get a really good rate. Actually, it took me a long time to find, but it turns out that they kind of cut out a lot of the middleman in terms of the proofing. It's all digital. It's all through their website is so robust, and it handles all that it's pretty much like it only hits a person once it's like completely ready to go, and they kind of give it a look over, and they're like, okay, this is good. And then it goes to print. But for the most part, we were able to really get the price down, which is what we needed to do. And even then it's expensive in terms of as magazines go, because we're small potatoes. But and that's something I learned with one of my bands. I was telling Pat is I was in a band like a decade or close to 2 decades ago, where we had an opportunity to do a vinyl release, right? And we used an East Coast company called, not Rafter, it was Furnace or something like that. It was called, and it was an East Coast company, and they could ship freight, right? But because it was freight and it was so expensive to ship, they're like, well, if you buy like 1,500, it's going to be a lot cheaper than if you just buy like the 200 that we were thinking about doing, right? The rest of the story. We went for the more expensive thing, put it on a credit card, right? And I am literally still sitting on boxes of those vinyls that are in my garage, like that I even tried to like give to record stores on consignment, and they were just like, sorry, dude, we already have a few of your albums sitting on the shelf.
Oh,
so, no, I mean, we sold
sorry.
several. Oh yeah, we sold a bunch of them at shows and stuff like that. But it was one of those things where if like people couldn't hear it, they might not take a chance on some random band on vinyl. But yeah, so I didn't want another one of those situations, And again, we didn't really have that kind of capital to just blow on like a huge order. So as is the case with these things, if you can only buy a little bit, it's going to cost more, So yeah. So that's kind of the issue. But we were able to find a company that was pretty darn cheap compared to everything else, And so I was able to, like you were saying, I was able to insert all the images into their online creator tool, and it stitches everything together the way that it should be. So yeah, that part was, worked out well.
And were you able to get like a sample sent to you first to proof it, to make sure everything went okay? Or did you have to just, do the gamble?
Because I print, because I do a lot of stuff at my own studio where I work, and I have a really nice printer. It's not that nice, it's not as nice as what you're holding in your hands, but it's really nice. Like Peter's seen some of the stuff that I've printed and stuff. And so I was able to basically print a copy myself and cut it and do perfect binding myself as a means of like, and then they also give you a digital proof that shows exactly where they're going to cut it and everything. And so we were like, yeah, this looks great. Let's go. So yeah, I was taking a little bit of a leap of faith, right? And so their factory was like super jammed up. They were super busy. They rushed our order. They sent it to us. and it had a couple of problems. There was a little problem with the cut at the top, and there were also some stray ink marks on a couple of the pages. Now, nothing so big that I think most people would even care. Like most people would probably overlook it, or they'd say, "Oh, that's the kind of thing you would see in the magazines you get in the mail."
Yep.
But again, for me, I was like, it has to be perfect. I'm paying for this, and also like I'm charging people that it has to be perfect. So I called them back, and they were like, "Oh, so sorry, our bad. We're gonna send you another order free of charge. Keep the one that you have. Keep the boxes that you have. You can give them away or whatever." And so that's exactly what we did. So we ended up with an extra print run that we sold at like a discount, basically, because great company so far, customer service wise, and I'm really happy because they nailed the second run. They put in a note. They were like, "We'll take extra care to quality control it before we print the entire run," and so they did. So yeah,
That's really awesome. That's very cool.
yeah.
So you talked a little bit about what you were thinking about for the next one. Different ideas, different contributions. Do you have an expected time that you plan on releasing it? It says issue 1, 2022. It's obviously, I'm sure issue 2 is not coming out before the end of December. So is it going to be a one a year, a quarterly, or just whenever it gets done, it gets done?
What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? And you're certainly not the first one that's asked it. That's for sure. So, it's funny. I'll share this. So at the very beginning, like back in 17, 18, when we were first talking about it, I was personally convinced we were going to be knocking these out on a monthly basis. If we were laser focused, this was going to be no problem. And so here we are in 2022, issue 1 is finally complete. So the way we sort of approached the first issue was we're not going to, set any artificial deadlines on ourselves. We're going to just do it as we've got time. And when it's done, it's done. It would be massively lovely if we did it on a quarterly basis, but that at this point, it just seems like setting a deadline would just put ourselves under the sorts of pressure that would not equal quality work at the end. So it'll get done when it gets done, and we'll maintain as regular of a pace as is possible. But to be honest, for us to come out and say, yeah, it's going to be quarterly or whatever is not the best idea at this time, I think. So
yeah,
would you
it's
agree?
been a process. It's been a process of scaling down our expectations, honestly. I want to say that I think the pandemic had a huge role to play in it being so late. Okay. Because I think that if 9/11, or sorry, not 9/11, if COVID hadn't happened, this would have been done back in 2019, honestly, or end of 2019. But again, so many things changed. I was working from home and I almost could not work on this at all, during that time. I think, yeah, at first we were so naive to think that we could do 100 pages and that we could do it quarterly or bi-monthly or whatever. And again, it's just been a learning process, understanding what it really takes to make a great magazine. I have a newfound appreciation for those guys out there who are doing this as a living. Okay. So Sega Powered, they have a lot of people behind that. Not to be taken for granted. I hope nobody takes for granted when they hold those issues every month that come out in their hands, that they realize just how many people it takes to make that happen, working around the clock, and that it's such a great, finely tuned product at the end of the day, all things considered, it's astounding. But I think what we hope for, realistically, I think that what we hope for is to do a annual fanzine that kind of caps off the year and kind of gives people an idea of everything that's gone on in the scene over that year. I think that is it's an ambitious yet sustainable and reachable goal. And I think that it'll serve the community quite well. No, they won't have as many issues on their shelf, but what does come will be quality, and it'll be something very collectible that they'll want, on their shelf. And it'll be almost like an almanac or a yearbook where they'll look back and they'll say this was 2023 in the life of Saturn, that year, these are the things that happened. And here are some retrospectives as well, or here are some developer interviews, so I really do hope that happens. That's kind of what we're going to aim for. If we get better and our output gets greater, then even better, but I want to keep people's expectations realistic.
I think setting because it's, it's that same balance, right? Where if
Yeah.
you set no goal and you're like, it's going to be done when it's done for magazine number one, that makes sense. But
Yeah.
for the rest of them, it's like,
Yeah.
you could go another 4 years very easily. But at the
Yeah.
same time, you don't want to lose how special it is. So I think a goal of like, let's try for one a year ish. I think
Yeah.
that's a pretty cool thing because it's going to push you to keep doing it. But
Yeah.
one a year shouldn't feel too rushed. And if it does, push it
No.
back a couple months, whatever.
Right.
But
Exactly. No, I think it's totally attainable. And I mean, we're going to continue to do the podcast and the Shiro show and numerous other things, homebrew competitions and PRGE and all that other stuff that kind of does get in the way, but for good reason, and we're hyped to do it. I think that with the magazine, it's just going to be finding a level of balance, and maybe even having more people involved. But definitely, like Peter and I are proud of this thing that we did, and we definitely want to do another one for sure. I'm hoping we're hoping to do like a big in Japan issue, like with very, very Japanese looking cover art and everything like that, and just kind of really bigging up all of the great Japanese titles that are on the Saturn, because there are different sides. There are kind of like different corners of the Saturn experience, and the Japanese side is a huge one, for sure. Can't be denied.
One thing I'm going to add real quick is, back in the day in North America, there was not a dedicated Sega Saturn magazine. It just didn't exist. Ultimately OSSM found its way onto store shelves here, but that was a UK magazine. And so, I feel personally, having kind of lived through that Saturn, PlayStation, Nintendo 64 era, that the Saturn story was never really told properly. And so, doing a magazine for a console that's long out of retail, one of the freedoms that you get as a writer is you get a chance to tell that story in a way that will be evergreen because you're no longer talking about current events, right? So what an amazing opportunity to get it right. And so you have to get it right because you don't want to put out something substandard because it's going to live on forever. So yeah, whether it ends up being, an annual sort of roundup thing, which I think is, how we're going to sort of stay focused for now, or if it increases to something a little bit more frequent, we'll just have to see. But bottom line is it's almost like we've got a responsibility to treat the material and the content with the care and the reverence that the fans feel and expect, right? So that's the mission that we've got for ourselves.
Awesome. So you just mentioned evergreen, which is perfect segue. So other than my stupid beer story at the beginning of this podcast, everything that we talked about here, like if somebody doesn't discover this interview or this magazine until episode 3, they could still issue 3, they could still come back and listen to this, and everything that you say still apply. It's still the origin of the magazine. But the one thing I wanted to ask, and I'm not sure how much you could talk about this, that only really pertains to today and could possibly be irrelevant by the time this even goes public. But what the heck happened with PayPal, and is there any good news from them?
Well, we just got some good news this morning. Let's see. In a nutshell, what happened? So we went live to our Patreon supporters first, like a week or two ago, right? And that was, you guys already pretty much bought this magazine. We're charging you the cost of shipping, so if it's $5 or if it's like $11 to Canada or whatever. We just offered it to the Patreon supporters. That went smooth enough, using PayPal merchant service and checkout. I printed a ton of labels. I don't know. I shipped probably 30 or 40 mags to our Patreon supporters, and then it went live to the public, and all of a sudden it was just like a blitz, like, okay, everybody's hopping on this thing. And I was coming into work, printing like 50 labels at a time, so it's shipping a lot of stuff out, and a lot of things were going to just a myriad of countries, and I don't know, I guess everything was fine until we got an order from Japan, and that was like the thing that tipped the scales or something like that, because all of a sudden
an order from Japan.
It was an order from, it was like,
not a refund, just an order.
It was just our first order from someone in Japan, I'm not going to dox them or anything like that, but essentially, yeah, it was our first order from Japan, and that threw a flag with PayPal. They were like, "Can you please explain this transaction?" I'm like, "What's there to explain?" But okay. And we're trying. There was no violation. There was no violation. We were never cited for a violation. It was just like, we find all of this activity all of a sudden, on this account that you guys just opened recently, to be suspicious, and now we're going to just put on the brakes, and the burden of proof is on you to show us the receipts, in other words. So it was like, I would have to take a picture of the sales page, the transaction, print out the PayPal transaction, the shipping label, the tracking information, and then the positive feedback that we received on Twitter subsequently, and it's like, here, what more proof do you need that we're just selling this magazine basically at cost? And we have like full disclosure written on our sales page, that this is exactly how much everything costs us. If you want it, take it. It's a limited quantity. So, if you want it, or if it's just too rich for your blood, no problem. No hard feelings, but yeah, I don't know. And so we thought, okay, well, we filed the appeal, and we'll wake up tomorrow and everything will be fine. Pat woke up to an email that said, okay, so yeah, we listened to your appeal and we've decided, yeah, you're banned. Like, we're just going to lock you down. And I'm like, how do you come to that conclusion, from all of the evidence that we provided you? So yeah, like, we were basically, that was a bad day. That was Friday. And we both had a bad day at work, and then we had to do Shiro show, and we just kind of like commiserated about it. And then Pat called, and we did another appeal. And I guess this morning we got an email that said, I don't know, a human being looked at it, I guess, instead of a bot, a human being looked at it, and they decided, we're going to partially remove the ban. So like right now we have partial access to our account, but we still have to,
what
I don't know.
Fuck? A human being looked at this and still thought maybe something suspicious was going on.
Yeah, like, how do
They checked your
even...
website, they checked your YouTube channel, they checked your podcast stuff.
And folks are online trying to help us out too. Like, folks are online, like you posted about it, and a couple others posted about it, and it says, your account has been partially restored. We reviewed the information you provided for reference, blah, 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 and have restored some features of your account. As we require more information from you, we've still limited certain features on your account. You'll need to provide the remaining information to regain full access to your account. And
you know what? I take back my WTF. Then that could just very well be the person, the human being who's looking at that pressed the button to start the turn back on process, but there's a process.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the weekend too. It's the weekend too. So I figure we'll go in on Monday, and whatever they're asking for, I will give them. Like, I've got nothing to hide. I've got all the receipts. I've got the receipts for the mailers and the labels and the, what have you, the bags and boards and stuff like that. Like, we're just this like tiny little operation trying to like send stuff out to the community. And it's just ridiculous, because what happened was, like, I used to send 50s, hundreds, I don't know, multiple hundreds of repros out in the mail, like high quality stuff. I'm not going to, but I wasn't sending people crap, but I mean, I was sending repros in the mail through PayPal, and I got not a word from them, like, and I did like multiple different games, and then like what happened was the pandemic happened, and like multiple emails from PayPal saying our terms of service have changed. Our this and that has changed, over the past few years. And I've not been working with PayPal over the past few years, because of the pandemic. Come to now, and all of a sudden all those changes add up to like, they are a wildly different company now than they were like a couple years ago. No,
I mean, they've been screwing people over for a very, very,
sure.
very long time.
It just wasn't affecting me. Now it's affecting me, and I get what everybody's saying, like the PayPal sucks website. Like, I get it now, because it just hasn't affected me up till now, but yeah, I'm a casualty. I'm another casualty of PayPal.
It's a really scary thing too. And I completely, as a nerd, I 100% understand how something could get flagged, because you have these algorithms that are designed to pick up on scams, and maybe just so happens the order in which you shipped to different countries match the exact flag for a scam that had just happened. So I understand that.
Mm.
And that's fair. But shutting your account down, not letting you, flagged, and like
Yeah.
it should be flagged to be like, hey, this looks suspicious to us. Maybe it's not. If you could just provide us that you actually shipped a product and
Mm-hmm.
that people are receiving it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point, it doesn't matter what you're selling. Like you're talking about, oh, I got receipts for this, receipts for that. You could be selling toenail clippings. Who gives a shit? If
Yeah.
you're telling people it's a toenail clipping and they're purchasing that and receiving it, transaction over.
Transaction
Period.
over. Yeah,
So
exactly. So
Yep.
and they froze us to the point where we couldn't even refund folks. So there's like folks who they've paid money, it's sitting there frozen, we can't touch it, I can't buy a label, I can't like click ship this order, so it's like it sucks, I can't even refund them, which I would do. I would just refund them and say, hey, please put your order through again, like once we get this all sorted out, but I can't. So right now we're really just crossing our fingers and hoping that PayPal comes to see reason, at least for now in this, and then we'll like take the money and run, because like seriously. But yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, at least nowadays there's multiple options for different ways to sell that don't involve PayPal. But
Right.
yeah, I
Yep.
mean, that's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
frustrating.
which we will definitely we are in the process of looking into.
We are exploring. Yep, absolutely.
So, did I miss something that you all wanted to talk about? I've clearly been gushing over this thing, and if by now an hour into it, people can't figure out that this is actually 100% genuine gushing over this, then I don't know what else I could say. But I really
Mhm.
loved it. I loved the insert. I don't know if that was a surprise and I wasn't supposed to show that or something,
Yeah,
but
that's fine. Yeah, it was a little surprise. We went to Patrick and we got to do like a pre-screening of Sonic 2, and I went there and they give out a bunch of stuff to kids, they give and then once the kids left and everything like that, they still had like this huge bag of like posters, towels, stickers. The lady was just like, the PR lady was just like, you want this stuff? Because otherwise it's going to end up in a dumpster. I was like, yes, I'll take it. So I was like, those stickers seem like a great thing to shove in the magazine, and then the towels I'm probably going to bring to PRGE and give to folks to wipe themselves when they're doing the tournaments or whatever. So there's like these yellow, blue, and red Sonic 2 towels. They're really cool. So yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah.
Are they like hand towels or like big
They're like, yeah,
towels?
they're like little terry cloth, like hand towels. You might put it in your back pocket if you're in a band or something like that. It's like that kind of thing, or like almost like a handkerchief, but instead they're like made of like a terry cloth kind of material. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, did I miss anything, or did we
I
sum
don't think
everything up
so.
kind of
Yeah,
nicely?
it's
Yeah, we've covered
unless
it
Peter
pretty
wants to
well.
add something.
Look, let me just say this. The folks that engage with the Saturn community, whether it's through Facebook or online or Discord or whatever way, I firmly believe that they still only represent a small cross section of Saturn fans, right?
Mm.
And so there's probably a lot of fans that we just never hear from, or people that want this sort of a product and will enjoy it that we're not going to hear from. And I just, if there's something I could say to all those folks, enjoy it. We made this for you because, back in the day before the internet days, we were those fans. We didn't have the ability to connect with hundreds of other Saturn fans. So, if this is something that is meaningful to you, you're going to read it, you're going to enjoy it, and it's going to sort of harken back to those days when the Saturn was current, then, mission accomplished. We've done our job. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to make that point that there are just a ton of busy adults that
Mhm.
don't have time to provide feedback that I'm sure love what you do. I'm sure a large percentage of your Patreon subscribers love what you do, but they don't have time to post. They don't have time to engage in
Right,
conversations. So they're just like, hey, I'm going to keep firing them whatever my monthly subscription is and hope that they keep doing what they're doing. So, you
right.
know, I always try to remind creators of that. That's one of the many reasons why I always suggest, if you're a creator, go to some live event on a regular basis. If it's only once a year, fine. But I've met so many people that I've never seen in the comments that, never, they told me they don't even have social media accounts that, have a cool story about something we did that helped them out. And it's just a really great reminder that you have a lot of people that love what you do. And it's the internet. Sometimes you'll go 3 weeks and you'll only hear about the people that hate you. And it's
Yeah.
like, why am I even doing this? And you got to remind yourself constantly that is the small minority of people who follow your work, and that
Yeah.
I guarantee you there are so many people that are loving this thing that respectfully you'll just never hear from. So just try to keep that in your mind, that whatever good you think you've done, you're hitting more people than you realize.
Mm-hmm.
Fair
And I have
point.
one message. Might sound silly, but I'm going to say it anyway. Is that this applies to everybody? Really, gamers out there. Gaming can be quite a consumptive activity. It involves consumption of media and stuff like that. But like, I feel like we're all good at something, and you, whoever happens to be listening to this or watching this, are good at something. You have value and you bring something to the table. I don't know what it is, but everybody has different skills, different talents, and if you just, find a way that you can focus that into creating something, not to get clicks or views or whatever, but to serve the community, to create something that you can look back on and say, I'm proud of that. I created something. I didn't just consume, because you can spend all your time buying games on eBay or picking them up at flea markets and whatever, or, playing games and stuff like that. But it's when you create something that it ends up touching somebody else and impacting someone else in a positive way, be it, RetroRGB, all the videos that you provide to the community, which have a huge impact and an amazing collateral value, I feel. And then like any small thing that we can do to kind of make our mark, and it's not just to brag or say we made our mark, but it's really just to say we created something. We didn't just consume, we didn't just take, we gave back, And so I think, I would say to anybody, like if you're struggling, feeling like, you don't have a creative outlet, just think about what you're good at and think about ways that you could. I mean, there's this one guy who like, he had connections. He was like entrepreneur or something like that. And he found a way to get injection molds made for replacement Saturn cases. And he put them on Amazon. And honestly, I think it's a good deal. 10 for $60, that's $6 a case. And that's cheaper than having to buy, Joe Montana or I don't know, but John Madden football 98 or 97 or whatever these days, so, and they're great cases. And he even did a second revision, based on fan feedback, so, like different skill sets. People have different skill sets and different wheelhouses, so I would just say find what you're good at and create something, and then put it out there and see what happens, see the kind of like reaction people have and the kind of doors and windows that it opens for you, in terms of like meeting people and making connections,
Yeah, just to expand on that a tiny bit, I agree with everything you said, but to your point, you don't have to be the person that makes a bunch of videos and finds an injection mold in
Right.
your house. You could just have a mint condition manual and access to a really nice scanner.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's might be the
Yes.
only thing that you've ever created and donated to the community.
Yeah.
But you upload that, and now every time somebody needs a high quality scan for the rest of the time that the internet exists, your work will help people. So yeah, even the smallest little thing, and it feels good to create, even if it's like, you could argue scanning a manual isn't creating. Fuck off. That is absolutely helping the community. That is helping other people, and you should be proud about that. And you don't have to donate tons of time. Just every little bit really makes a difference.
I was just telling Andy, if you're familiar with the Out of Print Archive, he has been scanning game magazines for like the last couple decades. And I have benefited infinitely from that. Like, I can't tell you how many of magazines I've downloaded from his site and poured over backwards and forwards and studied so that I could get to the point where I was good enough or skilled enough to be able to put something together like this. So, my hat's off to him, and I will say it again, and that's what he does is he tries to scan these magazines and spare no expense in terms of like making it as good as he possibly can. I mean, he has redone issues that he found were like the color saturation was not up to his standards, or he graduated to a new scanner and he's like, well, now that I've got better equipment, I need to go back and redo those magazines. And he doesn't just scan them, he cuts the pages out. He sacrifices those magazines and cuts the individual pages out so he can get the entire page scanned. So like, my hat's off to guys like that. And you're right. You like, it could just be scanning something for the community, you know?
Yeah, anything.
Yeah.
So, well, this was a blast. I can't wait to do a follow-up whenever issue 2 is out. Obviously I'll put the links on where to find everything.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time this comes out, either the PayPal thing will be completely solved, or you will all very annoyingly hear me loudly come up
Mm-hmm.
with a bunch of people to rile up and get PayPal to wake up and help you out, because
Cool.
more people need to.
I
Need
hope
to
it's
get
the
their
first
hands
one, honestly. But we just ordered a new run, so we just ordered another run of, I expect them to come pristine, and so again, like if people still want them and people are like, I missed out, we'll order another run, we want people to have this thing, and so as long as our bank account stays in the positive and we can do it, then we will,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both very much. This was a blast, and I really appreciate your time. And hopefully, we could we'll do a follow up with issue 2.
Awesome.
Thanks
Great.
for having us.
Bob. Yep.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.